Welcome to the Breakout Growth Podcast, where Sean Ellis and Ethan Garr interview leaders from the world's fastest growing companies to get to the heart of what's really driving their growth. And now, here are your hosts, Sean Ellis and Ethan Garr.
All right, in this week's episode of the Breakout Growth Podcast, Ethan Garr and I chat with Darren Chait, the VP of Marketing at Calendly, the online scheduling service that I bet everyone listening to has used at some point. You know, it's not too hard to make that bet because with the natural viral loops, the freemium model, all of the pieces that Calendly has, it's really become an everyday part of life for more than 20 million users and 100,000 companies. So even if you don't have an account yourself, the people you're interacting with often do. So Ethan, what stood out for you on this one?
What's that phrase, Sean? An embarrassment of riches, right? When you have so many good things to choose from, it just becomes like overwhelming. I mean, if you could engineer the perfect SaaS business to scale, you'd look for virality and product-led growth. You know, something with natural viral loops, a freemium model, something that users have a reason to just continue using in perpetuity. Calendly's all of those things. So it was really interesting to hear how Darren approaches growth when he and the Calendly team have all those tailwinds. They have that embarrassment of riches to support them and help them grow. Yeah,
I mean, it's amazing. But yeah, we take a little bit of a step back. You know, even though Darren calls himself, or his title is the VP of Marketing, he's actually heading growth. And that was something we tackled kind of early in the conversation because his description on LinkedIn says that he's heading growth. But then when you actually go down to his title, he's the VP of Marketing. But you're right. I mean, when you look at a company like Calendly, it's you have so much virality that's just natural to it. There's all these kind of things that you feel like it could just grow on its own. But right. When you talk to Darren, it's clear that's not the case. You know, Calendly is very focused. They don't just take these things, these growth levers for granted. Yeah, it comes
never that easy.
No, and it comes down to the fundamentals. I mean, the fundamentals are always important with growth, and even in a company with that embarrassment of riches that you mentioned, like Calendly, they have to listen to customers. Cross-functional collaboration is absolutely essential. Yeah, they want to be data informed in everything they're doing. That's the recipe for success. And so even if you don't have all of the things that Calendly has, you can focus on the fundamentals and really maximize the opportunity that you're in.
Yeah, I mean, Darren says growth requires this mix of creativity, strategy, and what he was humorously calling fifth grade math, and that feels pretty accurate to me. I mean, I loved when he said cross-functional collaboration doesn't mean we agree on everything. Right. It means that we agree on what success looks like. I thought that was just a great way of framing things, and it's key for startups that are looking to get everyone pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, there are so many good nuggets in this one, and of course, we talked about AI. Yeah, it's such a hot topic in growth and marketing these days. Our last episode obviously was a deep dive with an AI expert, and it was really cool to get Darren's take on this as well. And he had one quote that just stuck with me for like a day or two after our call. And I want to get the exact wording right, but he says, if you're spending your day doing the same tasks that you were doing a year or two ago, you're not taking advantage of what's out there and what's available to you. And I just think that's such a great perspective. AI is changing everything. It's giving us so many more capabilities. So your workflow, even if you've got 20 years of growth or marketing, if you're doing the same things you were a couple of years ago, you got to take a step back and revisit it. And so there's a lot of nuggets like that in there. So we should probably dig into this one.
Yeah, let's get to it.
All right, let's go. Hey, Darren, welcome to the Breakout Growth Podcast.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Ethan. Great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, Ethan is here as well, my co-host. Hey, Ethan.
Hey, Sean. Hey, Darren. Good to meet you, Darren. And excited to chat with you.
Likewise, long time fan of both of your work.
I'm a longtime user of Calendly and fan of Calendly. In fact, we use Calendly for booking our podcast. I recently took on our podcast sessions. I recently took on an assistant and was mortified when she did not send you the Calendly link to book the meeting. If anyone needs the Calendly link, it's you.
That's right. We caught up, especially with time zones. It was nice and easy to get this booked.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things, and I gave you a little bit of a heads up on some of these questions ahead of time, but one of the things that I found really interesting on your LinkedIn profile is that in your summary, you talk about being, leading growth at Calendly, but then in your job title is VP of Marketing. So I was just curious if you see a distinction there, and maybe what you see as the difference between marketing and growth, if anything.
Totally. You're straight on it. I was very impressed with picking that one up, and it's very current for us. It's a thought experiment and an approach that we're talking about a lot right now. So in general, my background originally was as a corporate attorney, got into startups.
Wow.
I was doing what I realized afterwards was growth. I love to write, I have a legal background, whatever, but I never really saw myself as a marketer. And when I, grew through the marketing ranks here, I had this imposter syndrome of being a VP of marketing. So it's quite a funny topic. Now, what's the difference? Well, I can ask you. I mean, obviously, Sean in particular, you've written the book on growth and growth hacking. But I'll tell you how we view things here at Calendly. We originally viewed growth as the job of product and marketing here. We have a PLG, product-led growth company, which we should talk about a bit later. And it's a job that we both contribute to as we improve the product. We create greater and greater viral opportunities, viral loops, and we figure out how best to message the right thing to the right audience at the right time to help us grow our business. And we sort of share that nicely.
Yeah.
Now, what we've kind of learned is that Calendly has an extraordinary brand. It's one of the key drivers of our growth. Every month, millions and millions and millions of people are signing up for Calendly. We're scheduling millions of meetings a week. All the things are happening off the back of the brand. The way we tell our story, our view of the world, the way we articulate features and value propositions, our value proposition is very related. So where we're actually heading is we've split our go-to-market org, our marketing org, into product marketing and brand and growth.
Okay.
And Tope, our CEO, describes it as the left brain and the right brain.
Yeah.
So I'm the left brain kind of guy. I'm there at the numbers, the levers, looking at how we optimize. And PMM and brand is all about very tactically, but the story we tell to who, why, and how the creative around that. So all of that is to say that it's very tightly coupled, marketing and growth for us. But we're really thinking about things with a left and a right brain approach moving forward.
Awesome. What's actually really funny is that I actually kind of stumbled into the VP of marketing role as well early in my career when I never took a marketing course in school, and I joined a startup early enough where it was like, I'll tackle that, trying to get some users on this product, and the next thing you knew, I got promoted to VP of marketing, and I was like, man, I better go take a marketing class if I'm going to be a VP of marketing. And went to New York University, took a strategic marketing management course, aced it, and then got way worse at my job when I was suddenly trying to do it like the textbook instead of being very like, what actually drives growth in this business. And so it took me a little while to forget the things that I had learned.
Seriously. It depends on the business. As you said, I talk to colleagues all the time, in CMO or VP roles, and they do something that it looks nothing like my job. If I'm running an enterprise sales business, it's all about pipeline lead gen, webinars, sales enablement. My job couldn't be further from that. But we have the same title, right? So it's just a naming thing, really.
Yeah.
I think in SaaS business, it's definitely got like the lines just keep getting blurrier and blurrier between growth, marketing, product. I mean, I'm working with companies and I'm like, am I a growth guy? Am I a product guy? Who cares? Like,
right.
It's at the end of the day, it's how are you bringing value to the organization? So I think it's probably good that it's ill-defined for you or interestingly defined. But yeah, I think you've already touched on it. But one of the, Calendly has got to be the ultimate viral growth model, right? It's
Ethan. Even before we kind of dig into the growth side of things, just in case people, I mean, if someone's been under a rock for the last 10 years and doesn't know what Calendly is, maybe we zoom back out for a second and just make sure that we
do a
quick sentence or two on what Calendly is.
Sure, totally. And often I've heard us described as like the Kleenex of scheduling. Even if it's not Calendly, it's a Calendly link. But what we do, Calendly helps individuals, teams, and orgs automate the meeting lifecycle by removing the back and forth while scheduling. So we help automate scheduling workflows. I can send you a link with my availability, and the workflows behind that often will drive group availability, round robins, routing, and sort of complex logic behind how we schedule. And it helps you really create a better customer experience and support the external meetings that you're having, whether that's with candidates you're recruiting, partners, clients, customers, whatever it may be. So
and saves yourself a lot of time as well. Like, with all that back and forth.
We see 7 emails on average, right, to schedule
a meeting.
Typically, it's crazy.
In fact, Ethan and I was talking before this call where he was just like, I have wasted so many minutes or hours, whatever it ended up being, just trying to get one meeting booked with one group of people, and that's expensive time.
Well, and for the record, that company doesn't use Calendly, which is killing me. But that actually sort of leads to the question I was starting to ask, which is the amazing thing about this product is its natural built-in viral growth loop, right? I send the first time I need to schedule a meeting and I send that invite out, the person on the other end, if they have been living under a rock and have not been exposed to Calendly, now they know what it is, and it's pretty immediately obvious, well, that would make my life better too. I guess how do you look at that from the perspective of how do you leverage that viral growth loop, for organic growth when it's the central point of the whole business?
Yeah. We're very lucky, number one. I think, you can design virality as much as you want. Your product has to be inherently viral, and a meeting is the definition of virality, right? It involves 2 people or more. So much like what Zoom saw during, the COVID and so on, not every product, even with the best execution, has the benefit of virality. So I want to call that out. For us, I think the other thing that's unique to why we're so viral is you see the value of Calendly by scheduling. So very often you'll have a viral loop in your product, a share behavior and the like, but by using the product being on the other side of it, I don't necessarily see the value. So let me give you an example. Let's take MailChimp, right? Many small businesses run on MailChimp, and at a certain tier, you see at the bottom of the email, powered by MailChimp. Now, that's great marketing. I'm sure they have a large proportion that click through. But really, I've received an email. What I didn't know the value of MailChimp and how easy it was for me as the email sender to find a template, create the content, get analytics on opens, monitor my customer base or subscriber base and so on, and the value of MailChimp. All I've got was a nice email that was interesting. The thing about a product like Calendly or Zoom and a few others is you get to the end, with the scheduling workflow, and I've had the aha moment. I've seen the value on the scheduler side. I'm like, oh my God, done, booked. I don't have to have 6 more emails with Ethan or with Sean. And that's very lucky for us. And then our job as growth folks is to refine that funnel. So how do we maximize the proportion of folks that book meetings to sign up, to activate, to convert, to have ladder success? And that's what we do day in, day out.
It's interesting. I would even say, you make a really good point that part of the habit around it is that as the end user or the new user, you're instantly engaged in the experience. And it reminds me, we always talk about Nuriel's book, Hooked. A big part of the Hooked model is that investment moment where you have to do some work. And once you do that, now you're invested. And actually going through the process of scheduling is part of that investment. So I think that adds... when I think about the habit building, it's like Calendly is instantly habit building through that model. Especially
if you end up setting up a bunch of different kind of Calendly links, and you end up investing more and more in the product.
For sure.
That's right. That's a big drive for us. Event types, which is the Calendly links with the different schedules and rules and the like. The more of them you create, the more invested you are, the more you're going to activate, convert, retain, and so on. So it's spot on.
So Darren, how long have you been with Calendly now?
Yeah, so I've been with Calendly for about 2.5 years. I joined through an acquisition, actually.
Oh, okay.
I co-founded a startup named Hugo. We were in the Bay Area, and we were in the meeting space, also meeting workflows, a lot around note-taking and actions. And we joined Calendly through that over the summer of 22.
Okay, I'm curious then, when you joined, how much time did you spend really kind of like study? I mean, obviously there's some obvious parts of the viral loop, but how much time did you spend like making sure it's a product that has grown to be so popular over time that before you can improve something, you need to deeply understand it. And so I'm curious, like, how you went about trying to understand how is this thing really growing, and then from there you can start trying to improve it. But I'm curious how you get your head around that.
I spent a lot of time really understanding the numbers. I think what's a challenge but an opportunity with Calendly is we have a very heterogeneous user base, right? So we have palm readers, dog walkers, and we have Fortune 500 companies. Yeah. And they all act differently, they do different things, they buy for different reasons and so on. So it's not a very simplistic funnel. So I spent a lot of time sort of slaving over those numbers, and I still do. Truly understanding each part. I got some great advice. Actually, our new president of go-to-market here, Shane Murphy-Reuter, he was previously the CMO of Webflow, and he's one of the best bits of advice he gave me is any great growth leader should be able to be the CFO of the company. And he's like, I'm not talking about going to school for finance and understanding that business, but you need to have such a strong understanding of the numbers to be effective, to understand where the leverage is, what's going to drive return, and so on. And I still spend a lot of time learning and trying to go deeper there.
And do you feel like freemium is an important part of making that viral loop work? If you didn't have a free version, would it work nearly as well?
Yep. So remember, right? We have millions of active free users. They're scheduling meetings, right? They're scheduling meetings with other folks who have never heard of Calendly. Many of those folks are going to sign up and pay. So very, very critical to our business growing, number one. Number two, with a true free trial model, at least for our business and many that I've been involved in over the years, your relationship would end at the end of the trial. Yeah. So 14 days, which is our current free trial for most plans, if that at 14 days you're not hooked, there are many reasons why, right? You sign up, you go on vacation, you're in a certain segment or industry, it's the wrong time of year, it's a quiet time, whatever the reason is.
Yeah, like the holidays that we just passed. Maybe you didn't have a single meeting scheduled for 2 weeks.
And then it's see you later, we're done. Whereas this way, we can nurture you forever. We can expose different features, we can try different things, we can have a long-term view on our relationship. So we don't want to close the door. So for both of those reasons, the viral loop and the future value of the relationship, freemium is really important to us. But we have freemium free trial, right? So you get basically the full feature set for the trial, and then reverts back to freemium.
And then, are there other elements of the product-led growth model that are important to your growth? So Calendly can obviously add value to individuals, but we have a lot of value for teams as well. You can have like intra versus intercompany growth. So it's very important to us too to give you a reason to invite teammates and collaborate, to combine schedules for group scheduling, to round robin between you, to analytics to see the meetings your team's booking and so on. So that's a different kind of growth funnel for us, and one that's very important as well. Naturally, as you've probably seen in all the various businesses that you're involved in over the years, larger teams retain better. Obviously, you make more money that way. So we like teams. But so for those reasons, that's a different growth funnel, and both of them, drive the virality of our product. Cool. Yeah. So. Obviously, just getting people to try it's one thing. Actually being able to build a healthy business means you got to keep them retained. Ethan, probably a good area for you to dig into.
Yeah, so I had sort of the standard question about like what retention strategies do you work, but I guess kind of a good question maybe for Calendly, because you've described sort of this natural way that it becomes part of your, it's this built-in part of your process. It goes every day, scheduling meetings, being scheduled for meetings. I guess another question would be, what is the enemy of retention for you? Like, what do you have to fight against to keep people coming back every day?
Lots of things. Retention is always every B2B SaaS company's and B2C SaaS company or software company's challenge. For us here, there's lots of different buckets why people don't retain. In many cases, it's a failure to create that habit. It's like what we were talking about with Hooked. If you get going, but it's not part of your process, your habit, you're not going to retain. And we can, keep you on life support for a few weeks by nurturing the hell out of you and trying to get you back. But unless you're a part of my business process, we're not getting anywhere. So that's probably one of the bigger issues. In general, use case, obviously folks sign up. I remember during the pandemic, there were some customers that were using Calendly for scheduling vaccines. Obviously, people who get vaccinated against COVID aren't necessarily great Calendly customers, but a lot of them thought this was really cool and they signed up. They just didn't have a use case, so they're obviously not going to retain. And amongst others, and then of course there's environmental and frictional reasons for lack of retention. Small businesses, they contract, they grow, they change over time, they cease to exist sometimes, unfortunately. Seasonal type use cases, we see huge education I touched on before in certain times of the year, and then not many meetings are scheduled over the summer naturally, with colleges and schools and districts and the like. So lots of different reasons. And what we have to do to address that is just split them all up and treat each cohort, each reason, each objection or challenge with its own strategy.
So do you have sort of your own sort of definition and measurement for retention, kind of unique to Calendly?
Yeah, I don't think it's unique to Calendly. We ultimately look at gross dollar retention, and a level above that, we split into usage and revenue retention. Both are important. We obviously care a lot about our free customers as well, and we want to make sure that they're continuing to use it. We look a lot at meeting intensity and things like that. How are they what volume and rate are they scheduling meetings? How's that changing over time? What's in character, out of character for them? So there's the usage side. And then on the revenue side, very traditional gross dollar retention and then net dollar retention, because we have expansion opportunities too. Mm-hmm. So both of those things are the way we think about retention here.
Yeah, one of the things I find interesting with Calendly is because I avoided for a really long time bringing on a personal assistant, and as I mentioned, she helped to book this meeting, and I was under the impression maybe that if I had an assistant who was helping me book meetings that I wouldn't want to keep Calendly. But the funny thing for me is that even though I use it a lot less now that I have her booking the meetings, when she's off the clock, it's if there's an important meeting to book, it's just so easy for me still to send that link out. So even with a lot less frequent kind of usage of Calendly, I still find it indispensable, and so it's kind of interesting. I wonder what I would look like on your end. Like, oh, am I a high risk customer because I'm using it less? But even if it looks like that in the data, I can tell you that I'm not a high risk customer. That I actually value Calendly a lot, even though I use it less now.
There you go. And I guess that comes down to how you measure value, right? If there was one really complex meeting that was so critical to your business with lots of different folks, or one regular meeting but just one a week where you have to coordinate a few people together, that could well be worth the revenue, right? For others, they need to be scheduling 50 meetings a week to see that value. So it's like anything there. And by the way, the executive assistant use case is one we hear a lot. We actually have some features around that, schedule on behalf of and the like, to allow EAs to be more productive, because their time also costs money, right?
Cool. Yeah. How would you kind of get the word out about that functionality? Because that's something that I think probably would have been pretty helpful for me to have her read, or even for me to read. How would you normally kind of use that or get that content in front of the right people who could benefit from it?
Yeah, it's tough. I think we need to, again, it comes down to segmentation of our customer base, and then how do we, market parts of the product to the right segments. That's for a solopreneur, schedule on behalf of as a feature is just not relevant. I don't have anyone who's scheduling from my calendar. In a bigger business where you have folks who are helping you be productive, like EAs and the like, that's critical. So maybe we need to do a better job if you want to cross that feature in that area. But we really try with product marketing and releases. We really try to cut up our customer base so we're marketing what's actually helpful for the way they work and the way they schedule.
Awesome.
Go
ahead, Ethan.
I was going to say, do you find that with a big challenge for Calendly as a whole is just avoiding feature creep, in that there's all these millions of things you can do, but like what you just described, there's only a small segment that can get, or it may not be a small segment, but there's only a segment that can get value from it. And the other segment can get distracted by it, right? So you're always, to me, there's always this challenge, but it seems like for Calendly, maybe a really big challenge. And I'm curious, if so, and how do you guys deal with it?
Yeah, it's a challenge, of course. One of our values and very much part of our ethos here is being incredibly customer-centric. Voice of customer plays a big role. It's something Tope, our CEO, is talking to customers almost every day, multiple times a week. It's very much part of our culture. So listening to customers is obviously how you drive these requests and ideas. How do you weigh them up and decide what to build? That's where it gets tough. You know, I love the Henry Ford quote, if you ask the people what they want, you would have got faster horses. It's true. But I also think that comes down to your ability to research and talk to customers. I don't want solutions from customers, right? I want problems. If I'm a product manager, it's my job to come up with the solutions. So we really try and listen to customers, but not necessarily give them what they asked for, but give them what they need or what they'll get value from. But no silver bullet there. It continues to be a challenge all the time for us.
Yeah, and I do think, that's one of the things we face at Dropbox too. It's like part of the elegance of the product is its simplicity. And when you start to add too much to it, you lose really like the key thing that makes it so great. So yeah, it's a struggle to stay true to a very straightforward, simple product. At least that's from the outside. That's what my assumption is. Yep. Go ahead, Ethan.
I just want to say, and I think that's also exacerbated when you are a market leader like a Calendly. A lot of times, the people who are trying to impinge on your space, what they're doing is creating features that you have to then decide, like, is that a feature we want to bring into our fold to combat that, or is it a good? Like, a few years ago, I remember there was a product that came out, and it was some sort of Calendly competitor, and I remember they had sort of one key feature that they were suggesting makes this better than Calendly. I don't exactly remember what it was, but something so that you didn't have to look at your own calendar or something. I don't know. But I was thinking, like, for a Calendly, that must be the challenge, is that there are always going to be things coming out in the world around you, and you have to decide whether like those are real threats or not too, and that influences feature decision as well.
It does. It absolutely does. And the other thing to remember is, who is your customer? Right? Like, if we built for, it's funny, when we used to raise money at Hugo and spend a lot of time with VCs, often are full of product feedback for you. And with the greatest of respect, they want to help you, right? They have views, they want return on their investment, and they want to help the founder. Now, when I think about VC as a use case, that's a very niche kind of use case for things. And getting feedback from VCs, unless you're building a product for VCs, is not helpful. And I think about that quite often too, right? If you look at a competitor who might have some killer feature and everyone's talking about it, but might not be relevant if it's not for who we serve and who our main customer is, or maybe it is, and we're late to the 8 ball and we have to compete. So you got to just assess case by case.
Right. So one of the things that we've talked about, obviously, why we were so excited to get you onto the podcast was just the viral story of Calendly and this product-led motion. It's like so many of the things that are really cool about Calendly are some things that make it kind of unique and challenging as well. And so kind of coming back to this, growth versus marketing versus product versus data, and when you have something that is driven by a product-led motion and virality, it is the intersection of so many teams working together that makes it work. So I'm curious, one, how you guys effectively kind of manage that and coordinate your efforts, and then two, that cross-functional challenge. Marketing is a function, and when marketing is in your title, do you ever find that you're limited in your ability to reach to other functions and work well with them when you are also in a function yourself? Yep.
Great question. So we're always iterating on these models, and I talk to peers in growth roles at other companies like us, and there's no simple answer to this. The way we operate here is we run cross-functional growth squads, and we group them and align them by stage of funnel and goal, essentially. So if I work on a expansion squad, my job obviously is to drive folks to spend more money with Calendly, to get more value from Calendly, and then they'll spend more money from Calendly. And there's lots of ways we can do that. And the ways we do that are really just channels. Is it a part of the product that's going to do that, where I can expose some other relevant bit of value that you weren't aware of in-app? Is it an email nurture sequence? Is it retargeted ads? Is it a brand campaign where you didn't realize that Calendly did so much more? And all of these things have that same expansion goal, but we operate as a squad where we're looking at that goal, we have a roadmap, a backlog, and everyone's hitting it with their different channels. So that's how we approach it here cross-functionally. Having marketing in my title and really marketing, as one of the key growth drivers. No, look, I mean, I think you've got to have the right folks where people genuinely want to move the needle and solve a problem. Most of the time, the best answers, the best solutions are cross-functional, where we hit it from every angle. We've been doing some work recently around churn and retention, and there's a product change, an email, a ad, a whatever, everything all happening together. And that's amazing. Where I'm an engineer, where I'm like, well, I've built this front end thing. How awesome if we could hit them when they're out of product tomorrow with this message and, bring it together. And that's the magic. And that excites people about working together. But at the same time, I don't think it makes sense to have engineers reporting to a marketer because yes, there's alignment, but you miss out on the technical mentorship and development and so on. So you need dotted lines and some sort of cross-functional coordination in my view.
Cool. So it sounds like it works, and that marketing in the title has not really been a hindrance for you.
No, not if you got the right people, which I'm glad to say it seems like we do here.
That's great. That's great.
Sean, you got another one, or
yeah, that was the main one there. I mean, obviously, I think there's an interesting area to explore, which is AI is kind of changing everything right now. So maybe we could dig into that a bit. You want to take that, Ethan?
Yeah, I guess just with AI doing just that, like changing how we think, how we approach. How are you guys approaching integrating AI into the Calendly experience, and like, where does that start? I mean, we talked a little bit about like feature creep, but how do you approach this now?
Totally. So we have very much an applied AI view of the world. The buzzword and the sexiness of AI, through the hype cycle will wane, right? We could have said the same thing about being cloud-based not too long ago. So in other words, AI is a critical part of how we operate and how we're going to and what we're building. But the fact that it uses AI isn't the value, right? What are we using AI for? Well, today, as you know, we support people in external-facing roles. So sales folks, customer success professionals, recruiters, consultants, business owners, and the like. And the meetings they hold ultimately drive revenue, directly or indirectly. So if we can make those meetings more effective, if we can, increase the value of those meetings, we're creating tremendous value for our customers. Scheduling is one piece of that, but the interactions that you have and through a relationship, an external relationship over time, has a lot more opportunity. So all of that is to say, stay tuned. We're absolutely building and releasing a ton, later this year, and leveraging AI to do that. And at the same time, Calendly aside, I think I've been the most effective in my career leveraging AI. We've built a ton of custom bots. It supports the way we write. It helps with analyzing data, looking for trends, modeling out churn prediction, modeling out expansion opportunity, trying to figure out the best next action that we can do to support our customers. All AI solutions that are in play with us now. So we're sort of hitting it internally and externally, but it's without a doubt the most critical. It's definitely a huge milestone in my career, without a doubt. Right, it's changing the way that we operate.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you. Sorry, we're having a little bit of connectivity issues here, so I apologize if I'm talking over you, but. I'm really glad that you went into the direction of not just AI kind of to drive features within the product or the experience within the product, but also how you as a team are using AI to do your jobs better. And that was really cool. Thank you for touching on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we actually just today, in terms of when we're recording this, we just released an episode with an AI prompting expert. And I think a big part of what Sean and I have been talking about is that AI as part of the growth leader's workflow is super important. And it's not just about the outputs of AI, to your customer base, like that are going to be impactful. It's also about using AI daily just to gain the benefits of it. It's great, like when you give it the specificity and context to help you grow, it speeds up growth. So I think, it is really interesting to hear you say there's two sides of it. It's not just the forward-facing part of what it does for Calendly. It's what we're doing to make Calendly better every day. So one thing I wanted to ask you is... sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think a good heuristic for people in many roles, especially in growth and or marketing, if you're spending your day doing the same tasks that you were doing a year or two ago, you're not taking advantage of what's out there and what's available to you. There's so many lower order tasks or tasks where I didn't have the brain power to analyze, to realize trends, to try alternatives that now I'm outsourcing, obviously, to AI-based powered solutions. So look back, think about the way you spent your days, and if it's the same, I'd be asking yourself, what am I not adopting? What should I be trying? What should I be experimenting with?
That's a great point. Like my day-to-day has changed so much now because of AI compared to a year ago. Like everything, my first instinct is, how can AI help me do this faster or better? It's super cool.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was curious, is there a single defining metric that your teams, but really all of Calendly, looks to as the driving force for the company?
Yes and no. When I think about growth, I think about incremental revenue, incremental ACV or ARR. So, because that takes into account, obviously, top of funnel growth, expansion, and then churn and contraction. So that's, if you had to ask me as a growth leader, like what is, if I had to limit to one metric and we were impacting that and nothing else, like that's success. But from there, it really splits out. And I think that's the magic of the model I spoke about earlier, where it's really hard to stay up at night or have those thoughts in the shower and be thinking about 12 different metrics, because there's just so many different directions I can go in for growth. If I really try and specialize our team, so all I'm thinking about is expansion, right, or retention or net new acquisition or whatever it is, and I can go deep and I can think about that. So yes, I think about the net new ACV, but I really encourage the team to stay more focused.
Do you guys use a North Star metric, or are you familiar with that concept?
Yep. So it's sort of set by team for us, but as a company, it would ultimately be an incremental revenue North Star.
Okay, cool. But it feels like from more of like a mission perspective that you could have something like weekly meetings booked or something that because earlier you had talked about you sort of have revenue goals and usage goals, that usage is often like a leading indicator for revenue.
Totally, and there's a handful of those too. Daily meetings book, meeting intensity, which is meeting per active user. There's a handful of North Stars there to obviously look at engagement and activity amongst our entire customer base, not just revenue. So each sort of area of our product or business has a handful of North Stars as well.
Yeah. And then I want to go back to something you've touched on a couple of times is when we talked about competitors and feature creep and some of these things, you keep coming back to like ultimately it's customers. Ultimately, what do our customers need? How do we respond to their needs? I'm curious whether it's in product development or growth and growth initiative ideas. How are you kind of gathering feedback and using that to make better decisions on your end?
Yeah, usually we have a research team here, so we're looking at it from a qualitative standpoint, talking to customers every day, NPS scoring, feedback, research, in terms of interviews, focus groups, prototype testing and the like. We then do market research outside that, looking at the space, the problems we're solving, pricing, monetization. It's really just resourcing for that and focusing on the voice of customer through everything we're doing. So no secret sauce there. I think in my career, one of the things I've learned is magic happens at the intersection of qual and quant, qualitative and quantitative, where a customer telling me something is insightful. Watching what the customer does in terms of metrics and analytics is insightful, but the magic is hearing them explain what they think they're doing while I see what they're actually doing. and that's where you generate the critical insights.
And are you using that?
Sorry.
Just one follow up, and
Yeah,
then
go
I'll
ahead.
let you anything. Are you using those insights for like? Do you do a lot of experimentation, or like how does experimentation kind of fit into driving improvement in your model?
Yep. Yeah. Look, we're fortunate to be of a scale where you can run a lot of experiments and get statistically significant answers quickly. So we test a ton. Again, you've got to be careful about segmentation. I think making sure that you're testing amongst the right folks is very important. And not everything should be experimented. And there's kind of a whole conversation about this. I think as an industry, as a world, we love A/B testing, and especially earlier stage companies probably do it too much. There's times where there's conviction in what we need to do and why, and we should do it. So not everything is an experiment, but we do a lot of experimentation here at Calendly.
Yeah, but even when it's not set up as an experiment, being able to have some kind of data feedback loop that lets you know, have we made a bad decision in what we did,
Totally.
and should we reverse course?
That's right. Even to impact what's next, right? You learn about your customer through that feedback loop. Wow, that made them do that. So what if we did this now? What would that make them do? And so on. So it's true.
So I just wanted to go back to that. With such great resources for gathering user feedback, customer feedback, and you're talking about qualitative and quantitative methodologies, how do you make sure that the entire organization has access to that, or is getting those learnings and can figure out how to use all that information to make good decision making?
Yep. So we share out as much as we can. In every all hands, there's an element of voice of customer. All the quant stuff gets shared out in Slack channels daily with daily reports for the whole company. We really try and have that culture of sharing both qual and quant insights there. I think the other thing that's interesting is there's a risk in only sharing synthesized insights. So, if every month we have someone from our research team and someone from our analytics team stand up and say, here's what we learnt in 3 bullet points, you lose a lot of the connection to the voice of customer. So it's really important to hear from customers, to listen to recordings of calls, to attend customer interviews, to see raw NPS results coming in. And we've really tried to maintain that here through access to Slack channels, through bringing customers to our offsites. You need to hear it because the best ideas come from everywhere, and the only way we're going to be successful is if everyone has all of those inputs, not filtered through one mouthpiece of synthesis.
Well, I think so much of customer feedback can be nuanced even beyond just the words they're using. Like it's amazing if you're in the same room as a customer to watch their body language, to kind of get those visual cues that connect what they're saying with what they mean too. So yeah, I think it's a really good point. It's not just, if you're just relying on synthesized data, you may be missing out on a lot of opportunity.
That's right. And trends too, right?
So Darren,
passing comments that someone may say that you may dismiss. You hear that same passing comment 5 times, and all of a sudden you've got something really meaty here as an insight. So you need access to a cross section to learn that.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, Sean.
The patterns emerge when you have enough conversations.
Exactly.
So you mentioned you've been there now. Like you said, 2.5 years. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So I'm just really curious when you reflect on those 2.5 years. Is there something that you feel like you've really learned about growth that maybe you didn't really understand as much before? We like to kind of wrap up every conversation with just kind of digging into recent learnings, or just like advice for our listeners with growth. However you want to weave it would be great.
Sure. Tons. Let me give you a couple of bullet points. One, unsexy stuff works, right? Every channel can be a growth lever. Rates mean compound growth, and what I mean by that is if I can make a tiny tweak to the rate at which a website visitor signs up, or a sign up schedules their first meeting, or a new customer invites a teammate at scale, that is not only material multiplied by a reasonable base, or a large base in our case, but it's there forever. Every month that rate, provided nothing else changes, is yours. So these are forever benefits. So all of those things together, looking at what the levers are and what I can do to tweak the levers, the seams between funnel stages or between steps in the user journey, without a doubt is what's made the difference here. So that's one. Two, stop looking at everyone else. I think there's so much great content out there that scrapes growth, marketing and growth ideas from others, and there's tons of very specific books on topics out there and the like. It's very insightful to learn what's worked for others, but there's no playbook that's generic. And by the way, even if there was, by the time it goes to print, it's not relevant. Right. We talk about one example here would be webinars. In my last role, if I hosted a webinar with 5,000 attendees, it would transform our business. Absolutely transformational. It would be, I'd be the most successful marketer in history, and I would literally put us on the map. At Calendly, 5,000 people on a webinar, based on our daily meeting and sign-up volume, it's borderline waste of time. But the book, but if I take a growth marketing playbook and throw it in there, that's what I'm going to be trying to do, because that's what a marketing mix looks like in a B2B SaaS company. So I think it's helpful to know what others have done, but the idea of adopting a playbook is fundamentally flawed.
Yeah, it's interesting. That mirrors one of my big learnings and almost like oh crap moments is that in some senses when you get really big, it's like the job is fun, but in other senses, like when you're really big, it's like the things that can move the needle on a business as big as Calendly really do get narrowed down. And so coming back to what you said before, then it's about rates. But if you can improve your conversion rate in one area or your share rate or any of those, they can have massive impact. So PLG tends to work better at scale, and virality tends to work better at scale. But external channels like a webinar or even like paid marketing or something get harder and harder when you get to the size that a Calendly is.
They do. John, our COO, always talks about the metaphor of a really big ship, right? It's really hard to move a ship, as you know. But if I can do it 1 degree to the left or right, that ship is not stoppable, and that's going to look nothing like the trajectory, once we've sailed a fair bit. And I think about that metaphor very often for the same reason.
Yeah, another thing that I reflect on a bit from this conversation is the fact that you came into Calendly through an acquisition. So you've been a founder. I have this hypothesis that the best growth people have a founder background, and part of it is just because founders have a lot of risk. They're taking a big risk when they start a company, but two, they have to think about the big picture. They have to think about all of the interdependent parts of a business, and so when you step into a growth role, those are a couple of the big challenges in a growth role. Is growth is in your title. You better make it. You better make it happen. And then secondly, that you're gonna have to get a lot of disparate parts of the company working well together. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on founders as growth leaders, if you agree with that hypothesis or not.
Couldn't agree with you more. And that's really because what is a growth leader or anyone working in growth? You're a part-time CFO, part-time writer, part-time analyst, part-time creative. You're doing everything, and isn't that the job of what a founder does, right?
Yeah.
Being able to do that. So understanding the mechanics of a business and then doing what you need to impact them is really the crux of growth.
Absolutely. Ethan, any big takeaways? Yeah, go. Or
well, just going on. Yeah, with that, I would just say I always think of the head of growth role as the step back leader, the person who has to step back in the room and look at that big picture. And I think that feeds very much into what you just described. Also, just going back to your thoughts on playbooks, I think it might have been at an early growth hackers conference. Someone kept using the phrase. They kept saying, "This is suggestion, not prescription," and I feel like. That often gets overlooked. I mean, when someone writes a book, they write a book that by definition, it's a playbook in many ways for how you do this. But if you look at that from the perspective of what is the suggestion in that, not necessarily like what's the prescription of it, you can actually, a lot of times you can get a lot from those without being so prescriptive that you lose the sense of like, well, this doesn't necessarily apply exactly at my business. So I thought that was interesting. And then just the other thing that stood out is, you mentioned that like how important customer feedback is, which is a theme of every one of our 90-something conversations we've had. But one thought that you had, which I thought was helpful, is your job is to hear the customer's problems, but not necessarily take their solutions as it's really about understanding their problems, and then it's your job to come up with the solutions. I just thought that was a good way of putting it. You put it much more eloquently than I did, but yeah, this has been great, Darren. I've really enjoyed this.
So Darren, any last thoughts, reflections?
No, I know yesterday when we were chatting via email, you asked me what I understand about growth today that I didn't understand a couple of years ago. And I had this funny introspective moment when I'm sort of going back and trying to rewind to where I was. And honestly, we spoke about imposter syndrome at the beginning around being a marketing leader without the resume of that, and having not been to school for marketing and the like. What is growth? Growth to me, it's 5th grade math, right? Pretty straightforward math. Well, I've got my oldest is in 1st grade. It's harder than that. She's not multiplying yet. She's still adding and subtracting, but it's certainly not complicated, high school math. It's 5th grade math on top of a creative understanding of your customer and their journey. If you understand your customer, you can think creatively, and you know how your funnels work, how the plumbing works. That's all that you need to do with growth, right? Right. It's a straightforward model. You just have to be in the trenches, in the detail, and truly understand your business. And then from there, it's fun.
Yeah, that's a perfect note to wrap up on. Well, Darren, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to share your insights and experience with us. We're so happy to have you on the podcast, and for all those tuning in, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you very much.
Likewise. Thanks for the chat.
Thanks for listening to the Breakout Growth Podcast. Please take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And while you're at it, subscribe so you never miss a show. Until next week.